She watched strangers carry away her grandmother's desk for $30. Her father was dead. Her name was ruined. And the only thing Evelyn Hart had left was $150 and a newspaper advertisement. Wanted. A good woman for marriage to a rancher out west. In Boston, she was a disgrace. But 1,500 miles away, no one knew her father's scandal. No one whispered behind her back. She could disappear and start again. There was just one problem. She had never met this man. She did not know if he was kind or cruel. And once she stepped off that train in Montana, there would be no one to save her if she had made a terrible mistake. Luke Mercer was a widower who had not spoken a single word out loud for 5 days straight. He was a ghost in his own life, and he was waiting for her at the station. What happens when two broken people make a deal to survive together? Can respect turn into something deeper? Or will the harsh frontier destroy them both? This story teaches us that the life you planned is not always the life you need. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find where you truly belong. It is a powerful reminder that family is not about blood. It is about showing up every single day for the people who need you. If this story speaks to your heart, drop a comment and tell me what you would risk for a fresh start. Hit subscribe so you never miss another story that matters. And share this with someone who needs hope today. Rain was pouring down that morning, making the Boston streets slick and gray. Evelyn stood watching as men hauled out her family's memories. Then the auctioneer called out about a mahogany desk, noting some minor water damage. That little bit of damage happened when her grandmother sailed from Paris, long before her father's business partner ruined everything. The man's investments went bad, and suddenly debts were everywhere. A big fella in a heavy coat bid $30, just $30 for a treasure worth 10 times that much. But a family name meant everything, and the Hart name was mud. The gavel fell, and Evelyn felt it in her soul. A voice beside her said, "Miss Hart." She turned to see her mother's old friend, Mrs. Beatrice Thornton. The older woman stood under a big umbrella looking worried. "You can't just stand out here in this mess, child. Come to my carriage." "I am all right, Mrs. Thornton," Evelyn lied. "No, you are not. You are shaking like a leaf." Mrs. Thornton took her by the arm with a grip that meant business. "Your mother would never forgive me if I let you catch your death." Evelyn let herself be led away, but a part of her wanted to stay and watch the bitter end. She needed to feel the full weight of the injustice. Inside the carriage, Mrs. Thornton wrapped a wool blanket around her. "After all is said and done," she said gently, "you will be left with almost nothing." Evelyn's voice was steady. "I know. You do not have to soften the blow." Maybe $150 if she was lucky. Enough for a small room for 3 months. After that, she was on her own. Mrs. Thornton got straight to the point. "My daughter, Catherine, would like to hire you as a companion for the children." It was a pity job, plain and simple. Catherine had a nanny and more help than she knew what to do with. It was a kindness Evelyn just couldn't take. "That is very generous, but I cannot." "But what? What other choice do you have? No respectable family in this town will hire you. They all blame you for what your father did." Mrs. Thornton's voice got hard. "It is not fair, but that is how it is." The truth was, Evelyn's father had been tricked. His business partner had been stealing from their company for years, and the shock of finding out is what killed him. But a dead man cannot defend his name, and his daughter was an easy person to blame for all the trouble. "I appreciate the offer," Evelyn said, choosing her words with care, "but I cannot accept a job that was made up just for me." "Pride is a mighty expensive thing to have right now, child." "It is not pride," Evelyn tried to explain. "It is all I have left." The older woman's face softened just a little. "So, what is your plan?" Evelyn didn't have one. She could live on charity, always feeling like a burden. She could work in a factory, ruining what was left of her good name for pennies. Or she could do what she never thought she would have to consider. The idea had come to her from the back pages of the newspaper, right next to ads for farm tools. Wanted. A good woman for marriage to a rancher out west. She used to think those ads were for the most desperate people in the world. What kind of woman marries a man she has never met? Now, sitting in that carriage with her whole life shrunk down to $150, she knew exactly what kind of woman. A woman with no other choice. "I might have another idea," she said, her voice low. "But I'm not sure you will like it." Mrs. Thornton looked at her, ready for anything. "At this point, I'm willing to hear it." Evelyn took a deep breath. "I have been looking at the marriage advertisements. There are men out west, ranchers, who need wives." A long silence filled the carriage. "A mail-order bride," Mrs. Thornton said, her voice flat with shock. "You want to be a mail-order bride." "I want to be a wife," Evelyn corrected her. "You said it yourself. Nobody in Boston will have me, so maybe I need to go somewhere they have never even heard my father's name. These men out west are at least honest about what they want." Mrs. Thornton shook her head. "But your mother—" "My mother is gone. My father is gone. I am all alone, Mrs. Thornton, and I have to do something. I will not live out my days grateful for handouts from folks who feel sorry for me." The words flew out of her mouth sharper than she meant, but Evelyn wasn't about to take them back. "I am not asking for your blessing. I am telling you my decision. You have not decided a thing. You are hurt and scared, and you are thinking about doing something wild because you feel backed into a corner. I am in a corner. You have Catherine's offer, which is plain charity, and you call marrying a stranger a better choice." Mrs. Thornton leaned in close, her eyes like hot coals. "Now you listen to me, Evelyn Hart. I understand that pride of yours. A part of me even respects it, but pride will not fill your belly or keep a roof over your head, and it sure as heck will not protect you from a man who sees a bride he bought in the mail as property instead of a partner." The carriage felt tight and stuffy. Evelyn felt trapped by good sense she could not ignore. Mrs. Thornton was right about the dangers. A man advertising for a wife could be exactly what he said, a lonely, decent fella, or he could be a monster. By the time she found out which, she would be 1,500 miles from anyone who even knew her name. But the other option was to slowly fade away, a permanent guest in someone else's life. At least out west, she would be her own woman. A wife, yes, but an equal partner in building something. "If you do not mind," Evelyn said, her voice low, "I would like to look at the advertisements. I will not answer any without thinking it over." "I am not a complete fool, Mrs. Thornton." The older woman let out a long sigh. "I cannot make you stay. But I will insist on this. Any man you write to must give you solid references from a bank or a preacher, and you will not go one step until we have checked every single one." Agreed. It was more than Evelyn had hoped for. Agreed. "And you will stay here with me until this is all settled. I will not have you in some boarding house making a choice that will shape your entire life." Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat. "Mrs. Thornton, your mother was my best friend. She would never forgive me if I let you face this alone, even if I think you are making a mistake." Mrs. Thornton reached out and squeezed her hand. "Just promise me you will be careful, child. This world is not a kind place for a woman on her own." "I promise." They sat quietly for a bit, listening to the rain on the carriage roof. Through the window, Evelyn watched strangers carry away pieces of her old life from the auction. It should have hurt more, but she just felt numb. That evening, Evelyn spread the newspapers out on the guest room bed and started reading. Most of the ads were easy to dismiss right away. They were too vague, too demanding, or just plain desperate. One read, "Wanted, woman for marriage and farm help, must be strong." That was just a fancy way of saying he needed free labor. Another sought a "refined lady to grace my home." That one made her skin crawl, reminding her too much of the Boston society men who treated wives like pretty decorations. But then she saw one that was different. "Rancher in Eagle Creek, Montana Territory, seeks wife. I am 34, a widower for 2 years, no children. I own 640 acres with cattle. I'm looking for a woman of good character who wants a fresh start and an honest partnership. I can offer safety, respect, and a fair share in building a life. Write to Luke Mercer. Evelyn read it over and over, looking for the catch. But the words were just plain and honest. He did not ask for beauty or good manners. He did not promise an easy life, just safety, respect, and a partnership. She pulled out her writing paper and began a letter. Dear Mr. Mercer, I am writing about your advertisement. My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 23 years old, and your offer of a fresh start sounds very good to me right now. She stopped, her pen in the air. How honest should she be? My father passed away recently, leaving behind large debts and a bit of a scandal. Because of this, my place in Boston is gone. I have no money and no family to speak of. What I do have is a good education, good health, and I am not afraid of hard work. I am not looking to be rescued, Mr. Mercer. I am looking for what you offered, a fair partnership with a decent man. If this interests you, I will need references from your bank and another person of good standing in Eagle Creek. A woman traveling so far alone has to be cautious. I will wait for your reply. Respectfully, Evelyn Hart. She sealed the envelope before she could change her mind. Was this brave or was this crazy? She did not know. But for the first time in a long time, she had made a choice that was all her own. His answer arrived 3 weeks later. The handwriting was neat, like a man who did not write often but took his time when he did. Inside were 3 things: a letter from him, a note from the Eagle Creek Bank, and another from a Reverend Samuel Clayton. The bank said Luke Mercer was a man of his word who owned his land outright. The preacher's note was more personal. It said Luke was one of the finest men he knew, honest and fair. He had lost his wife, Sarah, 2 years ago, and had not been the same since. Finally, Evelyn read Luke's letter. Dear Miss Hart, thank you for your honest letter. I like a woman who speaks her mind. I have sent the references you asked for. Now I will speak plainly myself. I am not looking for a housekeeper or a pretty face. I am 34 years old and have learned that a ranch is too big and life is too short to go it alone. My wife Sarah was my best friend. When she passed, I figured I would spend the rest of my days by myself. But I'm tired of being alone, Miss Hart. And I know a good marriage can start with 2 people who respect each other and decide to build something together. Here is my offer. A solid house, but nothing fancy. Beautiful land that demands hard work. And a man who will treat you as a full partner. I will not pretend I will never compare you to Sarah. That is a part of me now. But I promise I will never expect you to be her. You will be your own person here. What I need from you is honesty. Ranch life is tough. The winters are fierce. If you need fancy society, this is not the place for you. But if you want your own land under your feet and a chance to build something that matters, we might get along just fine. If you are still interested, write back and tell me about yourself. Not the polite things. I do not care about your family name. Tell me what you are scared of and what you are hoping for. Respectfully, Luke Mercer. Evelyn read the letter 3 times. The words felt real and solid. Tell me what you are scared of. She took out a fresh sheet of paper, and this time the words came easy. Dear Mr. Mercer, I am scared of depending on other people's kindness for the rest of my life. I am scared of becoming small and quiet until I am not even there anymore. I hope for a place where my work matters, where I can be a true partner. I hope for a place where my father's name means nothing at all, model. I have to be grateful every single day that someone lets me draw a breath. What I bring to the table is everything I am. I have been in charge of a household since I was 17, right after my mother passed on. I can keep the books, plan out the meals, and oversee help, though I figure you do not have much of that. I can sew, put up food for the winter, and tend a garden patch. I read and write well enough to lend a hand with the ranch paperwork if you need it. I am strong, though I have never done the kind of outdoor work a ranch demands. I am willing to learn. But more than what I can do, Mr. Mercer, I can offer a partnership. A real one, where we are both plain about our shortcomings and admire what the other is good at. I do not know if I can ever love you like you loved your wife. I do not know if you will ever see me as more than a friend, but I believe we can build a good life together if we both try. I have saved enough for a train ticket out west and maybe a month of expenses. If I come to Eagle Creek and we find we just do not suit, I need to know I can leave without being stuck. I'm not asking for a guarantee. I know you are taking a big chance on me too, but this has to be my choice, not a corner I've been backed into. If you find these terms fair, just tell me when to come. Respectfully, Evelyn Hart. She mailed the letter herself before her nerve could give out. Mrs. Thornton had read both letters and gave a slow nod. He sounds like a straight shooter, she had said. That does not make it a smart move, Evelyn, but at least he is not promising you the moon. No, Luke Mercer was promising her exactly what she needed, a chance to build something solid, even if it started from nothing but need and a little respect. His answer came 10 days later. Miss Hart, your terms are more than fair. Be in Eagle Creek on the 15th of next month. Send a wire when you get to Helena. That is the last big town before our part of the country. I will meet you at the Eagle Creek station with a wagon. I am also sending $50 and a return ticket to Boston. It is good for 6 months. I mean it, Miss Hart. If you get here and see you have made a terrible mistake, you are free to go. No questions asked, no judgment. I will not hold you to something you cannot stand, and I will not be insulted if you decide this life is not for you. But I surely hope you will stay. Luke Mercer. Evelyn stared at the money and the ticket for a good long while. $50, a return ticket. She was not trapped. He was giving her freedom before he had even laid eyes on her. She tucked them both safely in her purse and began to pack her things. The train ride took 4 long days. Evelyn mostly watched the world change outside her window. The green of the east slowly gave way to the wide-open country of the west. Cities turned into towns, and towns turned into nothing but endless grass and sky. She shared her space with a young mother named Clara, who was heading to an army fort with her 2 little ones. The woman was cheerful and chatty. My husband says the Montana Territory is beautiful, Clara said. She bounced her youngest on her knee. Big open spaces and clean air, not like Philadelphia where you can hardly draw a breath for all the smoke. Evelyn offered a small smile. It is certainly different. Is your husband meeting you in Helena? Eagle Creek, actually. And he is... She paused, not sure how to put it. We have not met. It is an arranged marriage. Clara's eyes got wide, not with disapproval, but with pure fascination. A mail-order bride. Oh, how exciting. Is he a rancher? I hear most of them are ranchers. They say it is awful hard to find a wife out here. Yes, he is a rancher. Evelyn found herself warming up to the woman's spirit. 640 acres in Eagle Creek. My, you must be both thrilled and scared to death. Scared to death is about right, Evelyn admitted. I have never even met the man. But that is true for plenty of marriages, is it not? Clara said in a practical way. My parents arranged my marriage to Thomas. We met twice, and I do not think we said 10 words. But we have been married 6 years now, and I would not trade him. Sometimes the matches that start with good sense work out better than the ones that start with fireworks. It was a nice thought. Evelyn listened to Clara talk, thankful for the distraction. By the time they got to Helena, her stomach was in knots. She sent the wire to Eagle. Letting a decent woman get trapped in a small life is a crying shame. And Evelyn Hart had decided she wasn't having it. She stepped off that train in Eagle Creek, Texas, with her heart pounding like a drum. Back in Boston, a safe, predictable life was waiting for her. But she knew deep down that safe was just another word for small. Evelyn had learned something on that long ride west. She'd rather take a big risk and fall on her face than win a small prize someone else handed her. So here she stood on a dusty platform that was barely there, facing a wind that cut right through her coat. Eagle Creek wasn't much to look at, just a handful of buildings squinting under a big sky. Near a wagon stood a tall, broad-shouldered man in a sheepskin coat holding his hat in his hands. He looked just as nervous as she felt, and that, funny enough, gave her a bit of courage. She walked toward him, the crunch of her boots the only sound besides the wind. His face was carved by sun and work, and his eyes, a color she couldn't quite name, watched her come closer. "Mr. Mercer," she said, her voice sounding strange and proper. "Miss Hart," he answered, his voice low and rough, like stones tumbling in a dry creek bed. He looked her over, not in a rude way, but in a way that said he was sizing up the situation, same as her. "You made good time." "The trains were prompt," she replied, feeling foolishly formal. "Got your wire." He nodded at her single suitcase. "Is that all you brought?" "Yes." Everything she owned in the world was in that case. 3 dresses, a few work clothes, her mother's simple jewelry, and 1 book of poems she just couldn't leave behind. He took the bag from her without a word, his big, calloused hand swallowing the handle. "Wagon's this way," he said. "It's about an hour to the ranch. We can talk, or we can ride quiet. Your choice." She appreciated that. "I think we should talk. I have some questions." "Figured you would," he said, helping her onto the wagon seat. As the horses pulled them out of town, the land opened up into something vast and beautiful with snow-dusted mountains rising in the distance. "It's pretty," Evelyn said, and she truly meant it. "Gets prettier," Luke replied, his eyes on the trail. "But the winters are hard. A storm can keep you snowed in for weeks." He wasn't one to sugarcoat things, and she liked that about him. Then he squared his shoulders. "Look, Miss Hart, I'm going to be plain with you. I ain't good at this courting business. My late wife Sarah and I grew up together. We didn't need a lot of words. So if I'm quiet, it ain't because I'm unhappy to see you. It's just how I am." "I'm not expecting fancy speeches, Mr. Mercer." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Good. What I can give you is a straight answer. So ask what you need to ask." She took a breath. "All right. Why advertise for a wife? Why not find someone from around here?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because every woman here knew Sarah. They'd spend their whole lives being compared to her memory. That didn't seem fair to anyone." It was a kinder answer than she'd ever expected. "And what if this doesn't work out?" This was the question that had kept her up at night. Luke pulled the horses to a stop right in the middle of that wide-open country and turned to face her. "Then you leave," he said simply. "I told you I wouldn't trap you, and I meant it. Give it an honest try, say for 3 months. If you decide this life isn't for you, I'll bring you right back to this station myself. No hard feelings." 3 months. It was fair. It was a chance. She looked into his steady eyes and saw no trickery, just plain, honest truth. "And what do you get if I leave after 3 months?" she asked. He shrugged a little. 3 months of not being alone. Help around the place. It's a sight more than I've got now." That settled it. This wasn't some romantic dream. It was a partnership. A bargain between 2 people needing a change. She held out her gloved hand. 3 months. An honest try from both of us. Luke took her hand, his grip firm and warm. 3 months, he agreed. The ranch was tucked into a valley, a simple white house with a big barn looking sturdy and peaceful against the rolling hills. It was beautiful, but the stillness was deafening. "You won't be completely alone," Luke said, seeming to read her mind. "There's other ranches around. Town's got about 200 folks. It's not Boston, but it's something." She nodded. She hadn't come all this way for Boston. She'd come for a chance to build something real. And the work started right away. He showed her how to check the fences and feed the stock. It was hard, heavy work, nothing like the life she'd left behind. Her hands, once soft, were blistered inside an hour, and every muscle in her body screamed. But there was a deep satisfaction in it, an honest ache that felt more real than anything she'd known before. "You're doing good," Luke said quietly, seeing her wince as she gripped a pitchfork. "Take a rest." "No," Evelyn said, her jaw set. "I need to know I can do this." Back in Boston, a body could never be truly alone. Buildings were packed in tight, and people were everywhere you looked. But out here, the emptiness itself had a kind of weight to it. Luke pulled the wagon to a stop by the house and clicked the brake. "I ought to show you inside before the sun goes down. We can get your things later." The house was just as plain on the inside as it was on the out. It was clean, but there wasn't much to it. The main room was a kitchen and a sitting area all in one, with a big cast-iron stove, a long table, and a couple of chairs. Luke pointed to a separate bedroom, but did not go in. "That was Sarah's and mine. I've been sleeping in the other room since she passed on. You can take the main bedroom." "Mr. Mercer, I couldn't possibly. It's bigger, and it gets better light." "That's why it makes sense for you to have it," he said, and the way he said it meant the subject was closed. He showed her the rest of the place right quick. A smaller bedroom, a washroom with a copper tub, and a root cellar under the kitchen floor. A covered porch wrapped around two sides of the house. Everything was built to last, but there were no frills. No curtains on the windows or rugs on the floor. It was the kind of house where a man had stopped really living and was just getting by. "I know it ain't much to look at," Luke said, holding his hat in his hands again. "Sarah, she had all sorts of plans for it. Then she took sick, and well, I just didn't see the point anymore." "It is fine," Evelyn told him. And she truly meant it. She could work with plain. "If you do not mind my asking, what happened to her?" Luke's jaw went tight, but he answered her straight. "Childbirth. The baby got turned around, and by the time we got her to the doctor over in Helena, we were too late. We lost them both." The hurt in his voice was as fresh as if it had happened yesterday, not 2 years ago. Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her own chest. If she stayed here, if this arrangement became permanent, that same danger would be waiting for her down the road. "I'm so very sorry for your loss," she said softly. "Me too," Luke said, placing his hat on the table. "Look, Miss Hart, there is something I need to get straight before we go any further." He stared at the floor, clearly uncomfortable. "If we marry, I expect we will share a life in full. But it will be when you are ready and not a moment before. That is my promise to you." Evelyn felt her cheeks grow warm, but she met his honesty with her own. "I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Mercer. And I understand what a marriage entails. I am not afraid of it. But I would prefer we get to know one another first." "Agreed," he said, and the relief in his voice was plain as day. "Now let me show you the barn. You should know what you're getting into." The barn was bigger than the house and just as tidy. 4 horses stood in their stalls, their coats shining with health. Tools hung on the walls, everything in its proper place. "I have 2 hands that help out during the day," Luke explained. "Tom Henderson from the next ranch over and a young fella named Charlie, but the bulk of the work falls to me. And to me if I stay," she finished for him. "What kind of work would you expect from me?" "Depends on what you're made of," Luke said, thinking it over. "At the very least, I will need help with the house, the cooking, and the garden. If you have it in you, I could use help with the animals, too. Feeding them, mucking out stalls. Come calving season, everybody works. I have never worked with livestock. I can teach you, if you're willing to learn." There it was again, that idea of a partnership. He was not looking for a housekeeper, he was looking for a helper. "I am willing," Evelyn said. Something in Luke's face softened. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. "Then I reckon we will do just fine, Miss Hart." As they walked back to the house, Luke lit a few lamps, and the golden light made the plain rooms feel warmer. "I suppose I should make some supper," Evelyn said. "There is venison in the cold box and potatoes down in the root cellar. I am not a picky eater, so long as it is hot." Soon, Evelyn was moving around the unfamiliar kitchen, figuring out where everything was. The kitchen had all the basics, but nothing extra, just salt and pepper for spices. That would have to change, she thought, if she stayed. Luke sat at the table, watching her, not sure what to do with himself now that a woman was in his kitchen again. You can talk to me while I work, Evelyn said, peeling a potato. I will not break, Mr. Mercer. Luke, he said quietly. If we are going to make a go of this, you should call me Luke. Evelyn, then. Her own name sounded different in his rough voice, but not bad. They ate a simple meal of fried venison and boiled vegetables. The only sounds were their forks on the plates, but it was not an awkward silence. It was almost peaceful. After, Luke showed her how to bank the stove for the night and where the extra blankets were. I am up before the sun, he said from her doorway. Do not feel you have to keep my hours right away. Take some time to get settled. Thank you, Luke. He gave a nod, but then he paused. Evelyn, I am mighty glad you came. Before she could think of what to say, he turned and went to his own room, closing the door softly. Evelyn sat on the edge of the big, sturdy bed that had once belonged to Sarah Mercer. For 2 years, Luke had mourned the woman he loved, a ghost that would linger in every corner of this house. But instead of feeling scared, Evelyn felt a sense of purpose. She would make this work not by trying to be Sarah, but by being herself. They had agreed on 3 months. 3 months to see if they could build something new on the honest ground they had started on. She unpacked her small suitcase, hanging her dresses and placing a small jewelry box on the dresser. Tomorrow, her new life would begin. For the first time in a long time, Evelyn Hart felt a flicker of hope. Dawn broke cold and clear. Evelyn woke to the sound of boots on the floor and cattle lowing in the distance. She dressed in a simple skirt, braided her hair, and stepped out of her room. Luke was already gone, but a fire was going in the stove and a pot of coffee was keeping warm. A note was propped against a cup. Feeding the cattle, back by 7. Help yourself. Evelyn poured a cup of coffee and watched the sun come up. The valley spread out before her, vast and quiet. Out here, nobody knew her father's name. No one whispered about scandal or disgrace. Here, she could be anyone she wanted. She could be herself. By the time Luke came back, his face red from the cold, she had breakfast on the table. Eggs from the henhouse she found, toast, and the last of the fried venison. He looked honestly surprised to find a hot meal waiting. Did not expect you to be up so early, he said, hanging his coat by the door. My mother taught me that being lazy was a sin. Evelyn put a plate in front of him. I found the chickens. Right. I should have told you about them. They are your job now, if you want it. I can handle that, she said. They ate together in a comfortable quiet. She noticed the little things about him, like the small scar over his left eye and the careful way he cut his food. He was a man who had gotten used to being on his own. I figured today I could show you the rest of the ranch, Luke said, wiping his plate clean with a piece of bread. Introduce you to Tom and Charlie when they get here. They should be along around 8 o'clock. Then we can get to it. We could take a ride over to the Henderson place. Margaret Henderson has been pestering me to bring you by. How did she even know I was coming? This is a small town. News gets around. A small smile touched Luke's lips. I might have told Reverend Clayton I was expecting you. Well, Margaret is the Reverend's sister. She knows every little thing that happens within 50 miles. Evelyn felt a knot form in her stomach. And what does everyone think about our arrangement? Luke put his fork down and met her gaze. They think I have been by myself for too long, and it is high time I started living again. A few of the older ladies might have their opinions about a mail-order bride, but Margaret put a stop to that talk real fast. She said if it was good enough for half the women who settled this land, it is good enough for me. That sounds surprisingly open-minded. Folks out here are practical, Evelyn. We do not have the luxury of Boston's high standards. When 2 grown-ups make an honest deal, that is their own business. He stood and picked up his plate. I ought to warn you, though. Margaret will ask you 100 questions, and she will not settle for polite answers. She is a kind woman, but she is mighty direct. I am learning that being direct is a virtue out here. It is the only virtue that matters when the winter can kill you and your closest neighbor is an hour away. Luke put his coat back on. Get your warmest things. I will saddle up a couple of horses. In Boston, Evelyn had only ridden gentle mares in the city parks. The horse Luke led out for her was a whole different animal. She was a muscular paint mare with smart eyes that looked Evelyn over with clear doubt. "This is Rosie," Luke said, holding the reins as Evelyn got closer. "She has an opinion on everything, but she is sure-footed and smart. She will not buck you off unless you do something foolish. That is reassuring." Luke helped her get on the horse, his hand steadying her but not lingering. "Sit deep in the saddle, keep your heels down, and do not yank on her mouth. She will follow my horse just fine." As soon as Evelyn was settled, Rosie turned her head for a long, searching look. Then, seeming to approve, the mare faced forward and stood ready. Luke swung onto his own horse, a big bay named Chief, with a natural ease. "We will go slow. You need to get used to longer rides." They started across the valley, and Evelyn quickly learned this was nothing like Boston's smooth paths. The ground was rough and uneven, needing her full attention. Rosie carefully picked her way through rocks and brush, and Evelyn began to trust the horse's good sense more than her own. As they rode, Luke pointed out landmarks: the creek the town was named for, the summer pastures, and the fence that marked the edge of the Henderson land. "Tom Henderson is about 60, Luke said as they neared a ranch house much like his own, but bigger. "His boys handle most of the work now. Tom just helps me because he enjoys it, and it gets him away from his wife's chores." Margaret Henderson was already on the porch. She was a tall woman with steel-gray hair and sharp blue eyes that saw everything. She wore a flour-dusted apron and had a smile that was both friendly and sizing you up. "So this is the famous Miss Hart," she said. "Luke Mercer, you failed to mention she was pretty. You just said she was sensible and from Boston." Evelyn could feel her cheeks grow warm. "Mrs. Henderson, it is very kind of you to have me." "Nonsense. I have been dying of curiosity ever since Luke told my brother he was placing that advertisement." Margaret took Evelyn's arm and led her toward the house. "Come on inside. I have got fresh coffee and apple cake, and you're going to tell me everything." Luke and Tom Henderson vanished toward the barn, leaving Evelyn to face Margaret's friendly interrogation. The Henderson kitchen was the complete opposite of Luke's spare house. It was warm and full of life. Photos of children and grandchildren covered a wall. This was what a home felt like. "Do not compare," Margaret said, seeing the look on Evelyn's face. "Luke's house is empty because he stopped living after Sarah died. You give him time and you give yourself time, and that will change. I was not. Yes, you were. Everybody does." Margaret placed a large slice of cake in front of Evelyn. "Now, tell me true. Are you here because you want to be, or because you had nowhere else to go?" The question should have felt rude. Instead, it felt honest. "Both," she admitted. "My father passed away, leaving behind debts and a scandal. I could have stayed in Boston and lived on charity, but I chose this instead." "Good. The women who come out here running from something, they never make it. It is the women who come running toward something that put down roots." Margaret took a sip of her coffee. "Luke told my brother you had 3 months to make up your mind. That is fair, but I'm telling you now, if you break that man's heart, you will have to answer to me. Mrs. Henderson, he has been half alive for 2 years. I watched that man nearly break when Sarah died. If he is finally ready to try again and you are just playing games until you get tired of it, I need to know." Evelyn met Margaret's intense stare. "I am not playing. I do not know if Luke and I will suit each other, or if I can handle this life. But I promise you, Mrs. Henderson, I am giving this my all. I did not travel 1,500 miles for fun." Margaret looked at her for a long moment, then gave a nod. "Fair enough. And you call me Margaret. Mrs. Henderson makes me feel old as dirt." She then explained what it took to survive out here. She talked about the hard work of preparing for winter, the loneliness, and how you had to learn to handle your own emergencies because the nearest doctor was days away. "Some women think their husbands are supposed to entertain them," Margaret said. "They are the ones who end up leaving or worse. The women who make it are the ones who build their own lives, who find a reason to get out of bed each morning." "What is your reason?" Evelyn asked. Margaret smiled. My grandbabies, this community, and proving my mother wrong. She said I would not last a year out here. That was 42 years ago. When the men returned, Evelyn had a list of needed supplies from Margaret and an invitation to the town social. Everyone will want to meet you, Margaret said as she walked them out, and they will be watching to see if you will stick around. Do not let them get to you. You just be yourself. The ride home was quieter. The sun was higher now, and Evelyn noticed things she had missed before, like the way the light danced on the creek. Margaret is quite a woman, Luke finally said. She was wonderful. And very honest, Evelyn added. She is also very protective of you. Sarah was like a daughter to her. When she died, Margaret tried to look after me. I appreciate it, even if she can be a bit much. They rode in silence, for a time. Then Evelyn found the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. Luke, why did you really place that advertisement? What made you change your mind after 2 years? Luke was quiet for so long that Evelyn thought he would not answer. He stopped his horse and she stopped hers, waiting. Last winter I got snowed in for 3 weeks, he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I had plenty of food, and the animals were safe. There was nothing to do but wait. And I realized I had gone 5 days without speaking a single word out loud. 5 whole days of silence, and I had not even noticed. He finally turned to look at her, his eyes full of a deep sadness. That is when I knew I could not go on like that. I was becoming a ghost in my own life. His raw honesty hit Evelyn hard. This was not a man looking for a storybook romance. This was a man who realized he was fading away and took a desperate step to stop it. I understand, she said softly. In Boston, I was disappearing too, just in a different way. Luke gave a small nod, a quiet understanding passing between them. They continued their ride, and the air between them had changed. It was not love, not yet, but it was a shared feeling of being found. 2 people who had been slowly vanishing were now trying to draw new lines for their lives. When they got back to the ranch, Tom and Charlie were there. Charlie was a young man, barely 20, and he looked at Evelyn with shy, awkward eyes. Ma'am, he said, twisting his hat in his hands. He didn't push, just worked right alongside her as the sun dipped low, painting the snow on the mountains, orange and pink. That evening, she cooked a simple stew while he finished the chores. The silence in the small house wasn't awkward, but comfortable. When he took his first bite, he looked up from his bowl and nodded. Good, he said. This is real good. Just those 2 words, spoken in his low, quiet voice, felt like the finest compliment she had ever received. As she ate, Evelyn looked out the window at the endless stars over the Texas plains. She didn't know if this was a happy ending, but for the first time in a long, long time, it felt like a real beginning. And it was one she was choosing for herself. They sat in the main room. Luke was looking over his account books while Evelyn mended one of his shirts. The quiet comfort of it felt surprisingly natural. They were just 2 people sharing a space with no need to fill the silence with idle talk. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said, pausing with her needle. Always. What do you miss most about Sarah? Luke's pencil stopped moving. She worried for a second that she had crossed a line, stirring up a grief that was not hers to touch. But he just set his ledger down and gave the question some real thought, the way she would hum when she worked. Just little tunes she would make up herself. The house always felt like it had music in it. He looked off at the wall, seeing something only he could, and she would argue with me about everything, politics, the ranch, what was for supper. She never just went along to keep the peace. If she thought I was wrong, she told me so. She sounds like she was one of a kind. She was. Luke's voice was quiet but sure. But she is gone, and I am not. It took me 2 years to accept that I was allowed to keep on living even if she did not get to. Evelyn set her mending aside. I do not want you to forget her, Luke. That is not what I am asking. I know. That is why I am telling you about her. He looked right at her. If we are going to make this work, we cannot pretend she was never here. She is part of who I am. Then tell me about her. Not right now, but when you feel like it. I would like to know the woman she was. The look on Luke's face softened with something that looked like pure relief. All right then, it is your turn. You need to tell me about your people, your mother, your father. I want to hear about the good times, before all the trouble started. As the fire burned low, they traded stories. Evelyn spoke of her mother's garden, where every plant had a name and beauty was a kind of prayer. Luke told her about meeting his Sarah when they were just 12, and the life they had planned to build right here. It was not romantic talk. It was something better, something honest. When Evelyn finally stood, her body aching with exhaustion, Luke rose with her. "You did good work today," he said. "Better than I figured for someone new to this life. My hands might have a different story to tell tomorrow." He nodded. "Wear gloves, and do not be too proud to ask for help. There is stubborn, and then there is foolish. Know the difference." Later, she looked at her blistered hands. They hurt, but she knew tomorrow she would be a little stronger. She had survived her first full day. Only 89 more to go. But as she blew out the lamp, she thought maybe, just maybe, she would not need all 90 days to know if she belonged. The next few weeks settled into a hard but satisfying rhythm. Evelyn learned to start a fire before dawn and collect eggs from suspicious chickens. She cooked, she mended, and she churned butter, finding her old skills useful in this new life. Luke taught her how to ride a horse with confidence, how to spot sickness in the cattle, and how to read the weather in the sky. He was a patient teacher who corrected her many mistakes without a hint of judgment. They were building a partnership, something solid and real. The church social was 3 weeks after she arrived. Evelyn wore her best dark blue dress, trying to hide her nerves as they rode into town. "They are not going to bite," he said, noticing how tense she was. Margaret said they would be watching. Watching is not judging. He glanced at her. "They are just protective of me. You are the first woman I have brought around since Sarah passed. They just want to make sure your heart is in the right place." His lips curved into a small smile. "Just be yourself, Evelyn. That has been working just fine." Inside the small white church, it felt like every one of the 50 people turned to look when she walked in with Luke. Margaret immediately took her by the arm. "Ladies, this is Evelyn Hart." The introductions were a blur of names she tried hard to remember. The women were polite but watchful, asking about her trip from Boston. "How are you finding ranch life?" asked Mrs. Carter, a young mother with a baby on her hip. "It is challenging," Evelyn answered truthfully, "but I have never felt more useful." Mrs. Carter smiled. "That is the truth of it. My mother thought I was crazy to move out here. That was 8 years ago." "What made you stay?" "Spite at first," she admitted. "Then I found out I liked the work, and I liked the person I became out here." The talk turned to practical things, and Evelyn mostly listened, soaking it all in. These women were testing her, wanting to know if she was serious about staying. She could not blame them. Across the room, Luke was talking with a group of men, and when he laughed, a warmth spread through her chest. "I have not heard him laugh like that in a long time," Margaret said quietly at her elbow. "That is your doing." "Do not think I have not seen you looking around, wondering if you fit in," Margaret added. "You fit if you decide you fit. It is as simple as that." The social lasted for 3 hours. As time passed, Evelyn started to relax. Women shared advice and stories with her. Miss Patterson, the schoolteacher, invited her to visit the school, and Mrs. Chen offered her work at the general store if she ever wanted it. They were making a place for her. On the ride home, Luke was quiet for a long while. "You handled that well," he finally said. "Margaret was right. You fit. All I did was answer their questions. That is all people want out here. Honesty and a willingness to work hard." He paused. "They will accept you, Evelyn, if you want them to. Do you want me to be accepted?" The question was bold, but they were past Boston manners. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "I do." He was offering her a community, a place to belong, even if their arrangement did not work out. The generosity of it took her breath away. "Thank you," she whispered. When they got back to the ranch, she felt like she was coming home. That night, Luke spread the account books on the table. "If we are partners, you ought to know the numbers." He showed her everything, the value of the cattle, the cost of running the place, and the loans he was close to paying off. "We are not rich," he said plainly, "but we are secure. As long as disaster does not strike, we will be all right." Evelyn studied the figures. "You are being careful with your estimates," she noted. "Better to expect high costs and low income than the other way around." "Smart." She pointed to a column. "What about growing the herd? You have land that could hold more cattle." Luke looked at her, surprised. "You have been paying attention. I notice things. The south pasture is barely used. Tom's boys might be looking to sell some of their young stock." "It is a risk," he said. "So is standing still." She met his gaze. "I am just saying the opportunity is there." A look of respect crossed his face. He saw she was truly thinking about the ranch as their shared future. "I will think on it," he said. "And if you see other things, I want to hear them. This is your ranch too, Evelyn. If you stay." That little phrase, "if you stay," was starting to sound less like a condition and more like a choice. It's a hard truth that some folks are thrown into a life they ain't built for. Evelyn was one of them, a city woman dropped onto a ranch where the cold could kill you without a second thought. But this story is about how the toughest places can forge the strongest people. Sometimes you gotta prove to yourself more than anyone that you belong. The first real test came with a winter storm that buried the world in white. Luke had been gone since before dawn, and by noon, a howling blizzard had swallowed the whole ranch. He stumbled in at dusk, a man made of ice, his face raw from the wind. Evelyn had hot coffee waiting. He was mumbling about the cattle being safe, but she saw the truth in his shaking hands. The tips of his fingers were ghost white. "That's frostbite, Luke." She made him soak his hands in lukewarm water, ignoring his stubborn claims that he was just fine. The pain of his hands thawing was sharp, but a different kind of warmth was growing between them. She told him, "Please be more careful. I am not looking to be a widow before I am even a wife." In that moment, something shifted. They were more than just partners in a deal. They were building a life. That storm locked them inside for 2 long days. They talked for hours, sharing stories and fears, learning the quiet rhythm of 2 people becoming one. When the sun finally returned, they were no longer strangers. A few days later, Evelyn was working in the barn alone. A sharp whinny from Rosie, her mare, pulled her outside. A little calf had wandered off and gotten stuck in a deep snowdrift, struggling for its life. She knew the smart thing was to go get Luke. But he was a good half-mile off, and she reckoned the calf did not have that kind of time, so she grabbed a rope. The snow was deep, and the frightened animal was heavier than it looked. She slipped and fell hard on her shoulder, but never let go of that rope. With every muscle screaming, she pulled that calf inch by inch to solid ground. Just as it scrambled free, its mother came running. Evelyn stumbled back, shaking from the cold and the sheer effort of it all. She had done it. She had saved a life, all by herself. That is when she heard Luke hollering her name, running toward her with a look of pure alarm. When he saw what she had done, he was torn between being proud and being frustrated. That was a dangerous thing to do, he told her. You could have been hurt. But I was not, and the calf is alive. He was all set to give her a lecture, but then he really looked at her, covered in mud and snow but standing tall. "You did good," he said, his voice soft. "Really good. But please, next time, you come get me first." Evelyn just smiled. "Only if there is time." Back at the house that night, Luke gave her a gift. It was a pair of fine leather work gloves lined with wool. "For your hands," he mumbled, looking a little embarrassed. "You have earned them." He admitted he had ordered them 3 weeks earlier. The man had been thinking about her, planning for her comfort. "They are perfect," she told him. And in her heart, she knew. 6 weeks had passed, half of her 3-month trial. But it was not a trial anymore. She was hoping that in another 6 weeks he would ask her to stay for good. She was sure she would say yes. Those gloves became a part of her, and as the seasons began to hint at changing, so did their partnership. March brought a false spring, a tease of warmth before the next freeze. Luke was teaching her the ways of the ranch, and she was learning fast. They were fixing the roof on the chicken coop when a new storm rolled in, this time a freezing rain that turned the whole world to slick ice. Luke was already moving toward the barn. "The cattle will panic on that ice," he said. "We have to get them to shelter." He started saddling his horse, Chief. "You should stay here." But Evelyn was already grabbing the saddle for Rosie. "I can ride now, Luke. You taught me. And you said during calving season, everybody works." He looked at her, weighing the risk. Finally, he gave a sharp nod. "All right, stay close to me." They rode out into a world of falling ice. She could barely see 20 feet in front of her, but she trusted her horse and kept her eyes on the dark shape of Luke ahead. They found the cattle scattered and slipping, bawling in fear. Without a word, they went to work as a team, turning the herd toward safety. In that storm, they were not a rancher and a city girl. They were partners, fighting the same fight, building their future one saved life at a time. The whole world was a sheet of ice, and the cattle were panicked. Finally, one old cow turned toward the trees, and the rest of the herd started to follow. Evelyn and Luke worked their horses together, funneling the frightened animals toward the sheltered pasture. Every muscle in Evelyn's body burned from the cold, and the fight to keep her horse Rosie from slipping. Her hands felt like frozen wood inside her gloves. Luke rode up beside her, his face grim. He shouted over the wind, "There is a pregnant cow down by the creek, and I think she's in labor. I cannot leave the herd." "I have got them," Evelyn yelled back. "Go help her." He disappeared into the storm without another word. Her world became very small, focused only on the cattle and the treacherous ice. A cold knot of fear started to form in her stomach, but then she saw him returning. Luke was moving slow, and a tired cow was limping beside his horse, Chief. Trailing just behind them was a tiny wet calf, a little miracle fighting to stand in the middle of the storm. It took everything they had, but they finally pushed the last of the herd into the sheltered pasture. The newborn calf collapsed, and its mother began licking it clean with a fierce focus. Luke swung down from his horse and immediately began checking the herd for injuries. When Evelyn tried to dismount, her legs buckled from hours of tension and cold. "3 with bad sprains," Luke said, his voice rough. "But no breaks. We got lucky." Lucky felt like a strong word, but they had prevented a disaster. "Can you get back to the house?" Luke asked, his eyes full of concern. "I need to stay here and make sure they all settle." "I can make it," she said. He had her take Chief, his horse, who was more sure-footed on the ice. The house was a warm beacon in the freezing rain. She stumbled inside and collapsed into a chair in front of the stove, too tired to move, just letting the heat slowly bring her back to life. She sat there for what felt like forever, letting it all sink in. She had worked cattle through a brutal ice storm. 2 months ago, she had been a Boston socialite who barely knew how to ride a horse. Now she was a rancher's wife, holding her own when it mattered most. The change felt strangely natural, like this person was always there, just waiting. She eventually forced herself to get up, change into dry clothes, and start some coffee. When Luke walked in, she had hot stew ready for him. He just stood in the doorway, looking at her in a way she could not quite understand. "You did good out there today, Evelyn." "You did too," she replied. "No, I mean it. A lot of experienced ranchers would have backed down in those conditions." "You needed help," she said softly. "That is what partners do, right?" He walked over and took her hands in his. For a long moment they just stood there, close enough to feel the warmth from each other. Then he gently let go. "I should change," he said. "That stew smells mighty good." Over dinner, they talked through the day's events, figuring out what they did right and what they could do better next time. It was Luke's way of handling stress, and Evelyn understood it was also his way of showing he cared. "The calf," she asked while they cleaned up. "Do you think she will make it?" Maybe, Luke said. Her mama is looking after her, and she is a tough little thing. We will check on them in the morning. He paused. If she lives, you ought to name her. You helped bring her into this world. Evelyn thought about the tiny creature, already fighting so hard to survive. Hope, she said. I would name her Hope. A gentle smile touched Luke's face. That is a good name. A real good name. Later that night, as the ice rain beat against the window, Evelyn realized she had stopped counting the days until she could leave. This was not a trial period anymore. This was her life. And instead of feeling scared, she felt a sense of peace. The ladies to make a meal for the Whitcombs. A storm had torn a piece of their barn roof right off. This was how a frontier town worked. Folks looked after their own because that was the only way to survive. Evelyn had seen it happen before, but it still got to her, the way everyone dropped everything to help. I can cook, she said. I was hoping you would say that. We can ride over together. The Whittam place was buzzing with activity when they got there. A good half-dozen men were already up on the barn, their voices carrying as they hollered back and forth about how to fix it. Inside, Margaret was running the kitchen like a general. Evelyn, thank goodness. I need someone who can make a decent biscuit. Mrs. Carter tries, bless her heart, but she always leaves out the salt. Margaret handed Evelyn a bowl and some flour. We have to feed 20 men by noon. Can you make 6 dozen? I can try. Do not try, do it. But Margaret's voice was warm, and she was smiling. You are one of us now, whether you know it or not. We all lean on each other out here. Evelyn got to work with the other women, finding the easy rhythm of a kitchen full of helping hands. They talked as they worked, not about silly gossip, but about real things. Who needed a hand with their spring planting, and which families were having a tough time after the winter. Evelyn, we are thinking about starting up a little library, Sarah Patterson said. Just a small thing, passing books between families. Would you be willing to share any of yours? I only brought one book with me, but I can write back to Boston for more. That would be wonderful. We are tired of reading nothing but farming manuals and the Bible. Sarah's eyes lit up. And if you have the time, we sure could use another reader down at the school. I have 43 children from 6 years old to 16. It is a handful. Evelyn had never thought about teaching, but the need was plain as day, and she heard herself nod. I could read to the little ones, and maybe help with their numbers. You would be a lifesaver. Most of the children can do practical math just fine, but they are lacking the formal schooling. It was a chance to have a purpose beyond the ranch, beyond just her and Luke. Evelyn felt a little spark of excitement. By noon, they had enough food to feed a small army. The men came inside, tired and caked in mud, grateful for hot coffee. Luke caught her eye from across the room and gave her a real smile. She realized he was proud of her, proud that she had found her place in this community. The feeling was mutual. They stayed until it was dark, helping with the repairs. By the time they started for home, Evelyn was tired down to her bones, but happy. This was what she had been missing in Boston, the feeling of being truly needed. You did good today, Luke said as they rode along. Margaret is already talking about you like you have been here forever. They made it easy. Everyone did. You made it easy, Luke said. Then he got quiet for a moment. Evelyn, I know we agreed on 3 months to give this a fair shot. Her heart skipped a beat. It had only been a little over 2 months. Was he about to tell her it was not working out? We are getting close to that deadline, Luke went on. And I have to know, do you need the full 3 months or have you made up your mind? Evelyn stopped her horse. Luke pulled up next to her as the last bit of daylight faded away. Why are you asking me now? Because if you are planning on leaving, I would rather know sooner than later, before I... He stopped himself. Before I get my hopes up for something more. And if you are planning on staying, then I want to make this a real marriage, not some kind of trial with an end date. I'm not asking for love, Evelyn, but I am asking for a commitment. For you to build a life here with me. For good. Evelyn thought about the woman she was 2 months ago, scared and just trying to hold on. That woman felt like a stranger now. She had been replaced by someone stronger. I do not need the full 3 months, she said softly. I decided weeks ago that I wanted to stay. Relief washed over Luke's face. Good, good. On one condition, name it. We do this as equal partners, just like you promised. My ideas matter as much as yours. This ranch belongs to both of us, for real. Agreed. Anything else? Evelyn smiled. Get me a proper wedding ring. It does not have to be fancy, but I want something to wear. A symbol that this is real. I can do that. Luke swung down from his horse. Evelyn Hart, will you marry me for real this time? Yes, she said. I will. Luke helped her down, and for a moment they just stood there in the cool night air. Then he gently bent his head and kissed her. It was a careful kiss, but it was full of promise. When they pulled away, she knew she had made the right choice. They rode home in a comfortable silence. The house ahead of them was dark, but it felt like home. Not just a place to live, but a real home. Things moved quickly after that. They decided to get married at the church the next Sunday with the whole town invited. Margaret took charge of the party afterward. Every excuse for a celebration is a good one out here, Margaret told her. We take our joy where we can get it. Let us celebrate this. Luke rode to Helena and came back with a simple gold band. He slid it on her finger right there in the kitchen. It was my grandmother's, he said. My mother told me to save it for the right woman. Evelyn turned the ring in the lamplight. It fit like it was made for her. It is beautiful. Thank you, Luke said, for saying yes, for staying, for giving us a chance. The wedding was just 6 days away. Margaret and the other women showed up with fabric, insisting Evelyn needed a proper dress. You only get married once, Mrs. Carter said as she pinned cloth to Evelyn's shoulders. Well, some people do it more than once, but you know what I mean. This day ought to be special. They made a simple, beautiful dress from soft ivory wool. Sarah Patterson gave her some lace for the collar, and Mrs. Chen brought ribbon. All the while, Margaret gave Evelyn advice on being a rancher's wife, as if she had not been doing the job for 2 months already. Luke was a bundle of nerves all week. He cleaned the house from top to bottom and kept trying to fix things that were not broken. The night before the wedding, he asked Evelyn to take a walk with him down by the creek. Spring was finally here, bringing real change. I have been thinking about what you said, Luke started. About us being equals, having second thoughts? No, the opposite. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I had a lawyer in Helena draw this up. It makes you a legal co-owner of this ranch. Not just my wife with rights if something happens to me, but a true partner, starting tomorrow. Evelyn took the paper, reading the words in the fading light. Luke showed her the paper in the fading light. It was a legal document, transferring half ownership of the ranch to her name once they were married. Luke, this is too much. It is fair, he said, meeting her eyes. You have worked this land just as hard as I have for the last 2 months. You have earned it. He continued, and I want you to know you are not trapped. If something were to happen to me, you would be secure. You would own half of everything. Tears welled up in her eyes. He was offering her true security, something she had never had before. Thank you is not a big enough word, she whispered. It is enough, he replied. When we say our vows tomorrow, Evelyn, I want you to know I mean every single word. This is not just for convenience anymore. It is a choice for me, too, she said. I choose this. I choose you. He then surprised her by admitting, I should probably tell you that I am terrified of tomorrow. I am scared of letting you down. Scared you will wake up one day and realize you made a huge mistake. Then we will figure it out together, Evelyn said, squeezing his hand. I am terrified too, Luke. I am scared of not being strong enough for this life, of failing you. But being scared does not change what I want. And I want us. He pulled her close, his arm wrapping around her shoulders as they watched the stars fill the night sky. Tomorrow would bring a wedding and legal papers. But in that quiet moment, they made their real promises to each other. They promised to face whatever came their way, together. We should get back, Luke finally said. Margaret will not be happy if we are not rested for tomorrow. They walked to the house hand in hand. At the door, he kissed her good night. "I will see you at the church, Evelyn Hart," he said softly. "I suppose after tomorrow you will be Evelyn Mercer. I am looking forward to it." The next morning, the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Evelyn got ready at Margaret's house, surrounded by friendly women from the community. Through the window, she could see everyone gathering at the little church, ready to celebrate the small ceremony that marked the real beginning of her new life. Felt like a huge moment. "Ready?" Margaret asked, straightening Evelyn's collar. Evelyn saw herself in the mirror. She looked stronger, more sure of herself than the woman who had arrived 2 months ago. Ready. The church was packed with faces that were now familiar. Tom Henderson was there to walk her down the aisle, stepping in as her family. Luke stood at the front, looking both anxious and hopeful in his Sunday suit. When he saw her, his whole face lit up with a smile so real it stole her breath. Evelyn walked toward him, her hand on Tom's arm, her eyes locked with Luke's. The ceremony was a blur of familiar words and promises, but she meant every one of them. To love and to honor, in sickness and in health. These were not just words. They were pledges she aimed to keep. When the Reverend pronounced them married, Luke kissed her right there in front of everybody, with a confidence that made a few folks chuckle and clap. A blush warmed Evelyn's cheeks, but she kissed him right back, sealing their promise. The party afterward was a real community affair, an excuse for everyone to get together, eat good food, and share in a happy moment. There was music and dancing and children running every which way. Luke kept Evelyn close the whole time, his hand on her back or holding hers, like he could hardly believe she was real. They accepted well wishes. Have you ever felt like you had to be torn down to your foundation just to build yourself back up? That was Evelyn's story. After a scandal sent her packing from Boston society, she found herself in Montana, a place that didn't care about her past. Now she was married to a good man named Luke, and together they were building something real. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find everything you truly need. If you've ever had to start over, you will understand. After the town wished them well, they rode home under a setting sun. When they got to the ranch, it just felt different. It was their home now. Luke helped her down, and they just stood there looking at each other. He finally broke the silence. "So," he said, "we're married." Evelyn smiled, a real, genuine smile. "We sure are." He took her hands and said, "We will figure all this out together." That one word, together, was all the reassurance she needed. Inside, any nerves she had just melted away. This man knew her, and he chose her. Lying next to him that night, she thought about her journey. She'd traded fancy parties for frozen nights. She'd gone from surviving to building a true partnership. She had found a home, earned with courage and hard work. The very next week, spring showed up in a hurry. The snow pulled back to the high peaks, and the whole valley smelled like rich, new life. But on a ranch, a pretty spring means work that starts before the sun is up and ends long after it's gone down. Luke had tried to tell her about calving season, but his words did not do it justice. The first calf came just 3 days after their wedding. It was 2 in the morning, and Evelyn found herself in the barn, watching Luke try to help a mama cow in trouble. "It's turned around wrong," he said, his voice tight. His arm was already deep inside the poor animal. "I have to turn it, or we are going to lose them both." Evelyn pushed down her own fear and went to the cow's head. She started stroking its neck, talking soft and low. The cow's eyes were wide with pain, and Evelyn felt a pang of helplessness. "Come on, sweet girl," she whispered. "You can do this. We are right here to help you." Luke worked hard, his face a mask of pure concentration. It felt like a lifetime, but was probably just 20 minutes. All at once, something gave. 2 little hooves appeared, then a nose. With one last push, a wet, shaky little calf slid out into the hay. For one awful second, it did not move. Luke cleared its mouth and rubbed its chest hard. Evelyn held her breath until finally the little thing took a gasp of air. "We got it," Luke said, sounding worn out but relieved. They were both alive. Evelyn felt hot tears on her face. Life and death were so raw out here. She had just seen a messy, beautiful miracle. The mama cow was already licking her baby clean, and the little fella was trying to get up on its wobbly legs. "You did real good," Luke told her, washing up. Keeping her calm made all the difference. Over the next 2 weeks, 17 more calves were born. Most arrived without any trouble at all, but a few needed their help, and their days were long and exhausting. Evelyn learned fast. She learned when to step in and when to let nature do its thing. She learned how to feed a weak calf from a tube and how to spot an infection. But she also learned that you cannot win every fight. They lost one calf, and the sorrow in Luke's eyes as he carried the small body away was a heavy thing. It was a hard lesson that this life required a special kind of strength. Margaret, their neighbor, brought over seeds for a garden one morning. She would not hear a word about Evelyn not knowing how to plant. "You learn by doing," Margaret said plainly, laying out rows with some string. "Potatoes go here, beans over there. You will thank me this winter when you are eating your own vegetables." As they worked, Evelyn asked her what brought her out west. "Tom did," Margaret said, patting down the dirt. "He had this dream about Montana. I thought he was crazy, leaving a perfectly good farm for all this wilderness. But he had so much hope I could not let him go by himself." For the first year, she missed her old life, something fierce. "But then," she said, "our first child was born, and the homestead started feeling like home. I realized I was building something that mattered. Not just surviving, but creating." Evelyn finally understood that. In Boston, she was just surviving. Here, with dirt under her nails and a partner by her side, she was creating a life. That night, she proudly showed Luke their new garden. "This is real good," he said, looking over the neat rows. "Margaret is going to teach me how to can," Evelyn told him. "She says I need to put up at least 100 jars for the winter." Luke winced a little at the thought of all that work, but agreed it was necessary. As they walked back to the house, he put his arm around her, and it just felt right. "I have been thinking," Luke said, "about buying those extra cattle like you suggested. It is a risk. If we have a bad winter, we could lose it all." Evelyn thought for a moment. He was asking for her opinion, treating her like a real partner. In her old life, that would have never happened. "I think we should do it," she said. "But we have to be smart about it. We set aside enough money to get us through 3 months, just in case. We play it safe with our other spending for a while." Luke nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "That is smart, real smart. Bold enough to grow, but careful enough to survive. Is that a yes?" Evelyn looked at their home, at the man beside her, and at the future they were building with their own 2 hands. "That is a yes." Some folks believe a wife's life is worth less than her child's, but Evelyn was not one of them. This story is about a promise that defined a marriage, and it makes you think about what really matters. After sealing a deal for 20 heifers from the Hendersons, Luke and Evelyn rode home. He was quieter than usual, thinking about their future. He talked about building their ranch and then about maybe building a family. Hope and fear wrestled inside Evelyn. She had seen too much heartbreak and knew the dangers. She looked at her husband and made her terms clear. "Luke, I need you to promise me something. If I am ever with child and things take a bad turn, you have to make a choice. You save me, not the baby, me." She said it with a steady voice, knowing it went against everything people believed. "But I need to know my life matters to you." Luke pulled his horse to a stop right then and there. He reached across and took her hand, his gaze serious. "Evelyn, you are always my priority. Losing you would destroy me. If that choice ever comes, you come first. I promise." His words settled a deep fear in her chest. With that understanding, their partnership felt stronger than ever. May brought the kind of work that made calving season seem like a vacation. Cattle had to be moved and fences needed mending. On top of it all, Evelyn agreed to help Sarah Patterson at the school twice a week. Riding into town for her first day, she was more nervous than she had been in a long time. Sarah looked like she was at her wits' end. She had 43 students, from little 6-year-olds to teenagers, all in one room. "Please just take the younger ones for reading," she pleaded. Evelyn found herself in front of a dozen children, who all stared at her with curious eyes. "Good morning," she said, finding her confidence. "I am Mrs. Mercer. Who has a favorite story?" A little girl with blonde braids and a gap-toothed smile shot her hand up. "I like the one about the princess who slays the dragon." Evelyn felt a genuine smile spread across her face. "Well now, that is a good one. How about we read the old version and then we can write our own where the princess saves herself?" The children's faces lit up. By the time Luke came to get her, she was tired but full of a new kind of energy. "It feels good, Luke," she told him on the ride home. "Like I am helping build something important." That evening, a hard knock on the door broke the quiet. It was their neighbor, Charlie, with terrible news. There was a fire at the Wickham place, and it was spreading fast. Every person was needed. Evelyn banked the stove fire and grabbed buckets, following Luke out the door. They could see the awful orange glow against the dark sky from miles away. When they arrived, the barn was completely lost to the flames. But the whole community was there, working together to save the house. A long line of people passed buckets from the creek in a steady rhythm. Evelyn fell into line, passing water until her arms burned. Luke was on the roof with the other men, beating out flying embers. It was a picture of pure desperation and unbreakable spirit. She last saw Luke standing like a shadow against the roaring flames. That fire ate at the night for hours, and when it finally gave up, the barn was nothing but a blackened skeleton. The house still stood, though, and all the animals were safe. Mrs. Whitcomb just sat on her porch steps, her face a mess of soot and tears, her children huddled close. Her husband stared at the smoldering ruins, his eyes empty. Margaret was already getting things moving. "The Wickhams are bunking with us tonight. Tomorrow we start figuring out the rebuild. Luke, whatever they need, we have it," he said, no hesitation at all. This was how folks survived out here. You did not have insurance, you had neighbors. On the silent ride home, it sunk in how bad the Whitcombs had it. Their barn, their feed, their harvest tools were all gone. It could take years to climb out of a hole that deep. Luke said it soft. "That could have been us. One stray spark is all it takes." But it was not us, and we are going to help them. And help they did. For the next 2 weeks, men showed up every day to help raise a new barn, giving time and lumber they could hardly afford. The women brought meals and looked after the children. Evelyn and Margaret got a quilting bee going. Sitting with a dozen other women, stitching away while the kids played, Evelyn felt like she truly belonged. Mrs. Carter put it plain, "We take care of our own, because any one of us could be next." Evelyn agreed, saying, "It is a better way than what I ever saw back in Boston." "Oh, Boston has its charities," Margaret said with a wry smile. "But getting a handout from a stranger is not the same as getting a hand up from a neighbor." By late June, the new barn was standing tall. The celebration that followed was something else, with fiddle music drifting over the valley. Luke pulled Evelyn into a dance, and she laughed, telling him she did not know how. "Just follow my lead," he said, spinning her across the rough floorboards. She felt like she was part of a family tied together by hard work and good times. "What are you thinking on?" Luke asked her later, reading her quiet mood. "Just how much everything has changed, how much I have changed. Better or worse?" Evelyn thought on it for a real moment. "Just different. I left behind comfort and what I thought was security. But out here, I have found something more. A purpose, a partner, and a place where my own two hands make a difference." "Do you ever miss Boston?" he asked. "Sometimes I miss small things," she admitted. "Like my mother's garden or the ocean. But the life itself? No. I was shrinking back there, Luke, fading away. Here, I feel like I am finally growing into myself. I am glad you are here, he said. Me too. The July heat came on strong, baking the valley and turning every chore into a trial. Evelyn spent her mornings in the garden, canning vegetables as they came in. By August, she had put up nearly 150 jars, her hands stained from berries, and her kitchen always full of steam. One evening, as they watched the sun bleed all pink and gold over the mountains, Luke cleared his throat. I have been thinking on something, and I need your honest answer. Evelyn turned to him, surprised by his serious tone. What would you say to the idea of taking in a child? Not right this minute, but maybe next year. Taking in a child? Where did that come from? The Reverend was saying, there are children in Helena without a home. Their folks lost to farm accidents or sickness. They have got nowhere to go. We have the room, Luke said, his voice earnest. We can provide. I was lucky to have good parents. Seems only right to offer that to a kid who needs it. A warmth spread through Evelyn's chest. This quiet, steady man wanted to open their home not for an extra hand, but out of pure kindness. I think, she said slowly, that is a fine idea. A beautiful idea, Luke. But we would need to be smart about it. Ranch life is tough. Agreed, he said. Maybe a child 8 years or older, someone who understands what they're getting into. They sat together in the fading light, a quiet understanding passing between them. Some folks see a troubled child and just walk on by. They see a lost cause. But sometimes the biggest blessings come disguised as the hardest challenges. For Evelyn, who had journeyed from Boston seeking only to survive, the idea of building a real family felt like a distant dream. She and her husband Luke had built a partnership from honest work and respect. Now they had a chance to offer that same foundation to a boy who had none. This is about what happens when you decide to take a chance on someone everyone else has given up on. Evelyn felt a future she never thought possible unfolding. She and Luke had found their place, and now they were ready to make a place for another. The crisp air signaled the coming fall, a season of hard work and preparation. But this year felt different. Evelyn wasn't just surviving anymore. She was ready to build a life full of meaning, ready for whatever came next, hand in hand with Luke. A change was in the air, the kind that turns the cottonwoods along the creek a brilliant gold overnight. The sky looked bigger and bluer than anything Evelyn remembered from back east. They were in town one Saturday, loading up the wagon, when Reverend Clayton caught up to them outside the general store. His face was pleasant, but his eyes were serious, which set Evelyn on edge right away. Luke, Evelyn, good to see y'all. Could I have a quiet word? They walked over to the little church, and he led them into his office. He was a kind man in his 50s who had married them with real warmth. I got a letter from the orphanage over in Helena, he said, getting straight to the point. It's about a boy, 10 years old. His name is Daniel Parker. He explained that the boy's parents were gone, and he'd been in the orphanage since spring. He's having a hard time of it, Luke. A real hard time. The Reverend handed them the letter. It painted a sad picture of a grieving, angry boy who fought with the other children and kept trying to run away. The folks at the orphanage were worried he'd soon be too much to handle. Why bring this to us, Reverend? Evelyn asked, though a feeling was already growing in her heart. Because a boy like that needs more than just a roof over his head, Clayton said, looking them square in the eye. He needs folks who won't give up, folks who've known hardship and came out stronger for it. I thought of you, too. Luke was quiet for a long moment. That's a tall order, Reverend. A boy who fights and runs. It is, Clayton agreed. It won't be easy. He'll test you every chance he gets, but I believe you two have the patience and the heart to see the boy behind the anger. You'd be giving him a real chance at a life. Luke turned to Evelyn, his eyes asking the question she already knew the answer to. We'd like to meet him first, she said. We're willing, Luke added, and Evelyn gave a firm nod. That next week was a whirlwind of getting ready. They cleared out the spare room, and Evelyn sewed new curtains to make it feel a little more like a home. Luke even built a small bookshelf. What if we're not cut out for this? Evelyn worried one night. What if we just make things worse for him? Luke just pulled her close. Then we'll learn. We're getting pretty good at figuring things out, you and me. Daniel arrived on a Tuesday. The woman who brought him from the orphanage looked sour, like she was just waiting for them to fail. The boy himself was small for 10, all sharp angles and suspicious eyes, clutching a little cloth sack with everything he owned. Luke knelt down to the boy's level. Howdy, son. I'm Luke, and this is Evelyn. Welcome to our ranch. We're mighty glad to have you. Daniel's eyes widened for just a second, surprised to be spoken to directly, but he didn't say a word. He's not much of a talker, the orphanage woman stated flatly right in front of him. Evelyn's patience wore thin. Thank you for the long ride. We can handle it from here. After the woman left, the silence was heavy. Daniel just stood in the yard, stiff as a board, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Are you hungry? Evelyn asked gently. I made some stew. He gave a tiny shake of his head, but his stomach rumbled. Well, we're eating, she said with a small smile. You're welcome to join us. He followed them inside, keeping his distance. Daniel sat at the table, tense and ready to bolt. He ate fast, like someone who was afraid his next meal wasn't guaranteed. When you're finished, Luke said, I can show you the place. We've got horses and chickens. You an animal man? Daniel just shrugged, but for the first time there was a flicker of something other than anger in his eyes. It was a start. The tour of the ranch was a quiet affair, with Daniel trailing behind Luke and keeping his distance. He'd show a flicker of interest in the horse, Chief, or the scattering chickens, but that was all. This was a boy who had learned the hard way that getting attached to anything only leads to heartache. That first week was a real test of patience. The boy did his chores like a machine, never saying much. Evelyn tried her best to draw him out at supper, but she mostly got shrugs for answers. Luke figured it was best to just lead by example, showing him the ropes around the ranch without pushing for conversation. He would explain how to feed the horses and check the cattle, just talking into the open air. Evelyn and Luke knew he was just scared, waiting for the other shoe to drop. They just had to prove to him one day at a time that they weren't giving up on him. Then, on the 8th day, things finally came to a head. Evelyn heard hollering from the barn and found Daniel backed into a corner, letting all that bottled-up anger loose. You're just going to send me back like everyone else, he yelled at Luke. We are not sending you back, Luke said, his voice calm and steady. Yes, you will, as soon as I mess up. Luke just shook his head. Son, we knew you'd be a handful when we took you in. That does not change a thing. We want to get to know you, and nothing you do is going to make us give up on that. Why? Daniel asked, the fight draining right out of him. Luke moved in slow, like he was gentling a spooked colt. Because every kid deserves to have folks in his corner, and this ranch is a better place with you on it. After a long, hard look, Daniel seemed to believe him. He slumped onto a hay bale. My parents are dead, he whispered. They got sick, and I could not do anything to stop it. Luke nodded. I know, son. That is not fair, and it is not right. That I should not be difficult and just follow orders. Luke's jaw got tight. He told Daniel that woman had no idea what she was talking about. He said, You are allowed to be upset about what you went through. You are allowed to grieve. You have a right to your feelings, son. The boy looked at Luke with a sliver of hope. Really? Luke promised him. As long as you do not hurt anyone or break anything, you can feel however you feel. We can handle it. Evelyn could not stay quiet a moment longer. She sat on the hay bale next to Daniel, not touching him, but just being near. She said softly, Your parents would want you to be safe. We could never replace them, but we can give you a place to belong. Daniel's breath caught, and then the tears came. They were huge, gut-wrenching sobs. Evelyn pulled him to her shoulder, and he just melted into her arms, crying his heart out. Luke sat on his other side, a steady hand on the boy's back. They stayed that way until the storm passed. When Daniel finally pulled back, his face was red and splotchy, but the hard look in his eyes had softened. "I am sorry," he mumbled. Evelyn's voice was firm but kind. "You have nothing to be sorry for. Crying means you are healing." After that, Daniel started to slowly come out of his shell. He would ask questions about the ranch and even helped Evelyn in the garden. He even smiled one afternoon when a barn cat fell asleep in his lap. But it was not always a straight path. Some days he was quiet and withdrawn. Other days his anger would flare up over nothing at all. He pushed every boundary they set, staying out late or talking back. Luke and Evelyn stood their ground, giving fair consequences, but always making it clear that no mistake was big enough to get him sent away. Slowly, Daniel started to believe them. When the first big snow came in October, it was time to bring the cattle down from the high pastures. Luke decided Daniel needed to learn how to ride a horse properly. "You will need to know if you're going to work this ranch," he said, saddling a gentle mare named Daisy. "Am I going to work the ranch?" Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. Luke nodded. "If you stay, you work. That is how we all make it here. And if I stay, I get to keep working even if I mess up?" Luke stopped and looked right at him. "When you mess up, you fix it. You say you're sorry if you hurt somebody, you learn from it. But messing up does not mean you lose your place here. It just means you are human." Daniel took that in and gave a single nod. "Okay," he said. "Teach me to ride." The riding lessons became their daily routine. Luke and Daniel were in the corral while Evelyn watched from the porch. She could hear Luke's patient voice and see the trust growing between them day by day. One evening, Daniel came barreling into the house, more excited than they had ever seen him. "Evelyn," I cantered. "Luke let me canter, and I did not fall." "That is wonderful," she said, putting down her sewing. "Luke says I have good instincts, that I listen to the horse." He was practically bouncing. "Can I ride with you to check the south fence tomorrow? If Luke says you are ready, then of course." Luke appeared in the doorway then, and the look he gave Evelyn was filled with pride. They were really doing it. They were helping this broken boy heal. By November, Daniel was a true part of their little family. He did his chores without being told and helped Evelyn in the kitchen. He even started bringing books home from the schoolhouse for Miss Patterson to read by the fire. His teacher, Sarah Patterson, told Evelyn he was brilliant, reading at a much higher level than his age. She said he just needed some stability. "You are not just giving him a chance to heal," Sarah told her. "Oh, no. You are giving him a future." The first real test came later that month when Daniel got into a fight at school. Luke rode into town and came back with Daniel, who had a black eye and a stubborn look on his face. "He said my parents did not want me," Daniel explained before anyone could ask. "He said they died to get away from me, so I hit him." Evelyn felt a flash of anger, but Luke's voice was calm. "That boy said a cruel and untrue thing. I understand why you hit him, but fighting is not the answer. So I'm just supposed to let people say awful things?" "No," Luke said. "You are supposed to use your words to shut them down. Or you walk away. It takes more strength to walk away from a fight than to throw a punch. And if that does not work, then you come get me or Evelyn. We will handle it." Luke knelt down to his level. "You are part of this family now. That means you do not have to face things alone anymore. You understand?" Daniel's tough exterior crumbled. "You really mean that? About family?" "I really do." That evening at the dinner table, Daniel looked from Luke to Evelyn. "Can I ask you all something?" "Always," Evelyn said. "The Reverend said if things worked out, you could adopt me." He would not meet their eyes. Would you want to do that?" Luke and Evelyn had been hoping for this. "We would like that very much," Luke said gently, "if that is what you want." "I want it. I want to stay here with you both. Is that okay?" Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes. "That is more than okay, Daniel. That is everything." They started the adoption paperwork right away. It was a slow process, but by Christmas they knew it would be final in the new year. Christmas was a wonderful surprise. The whole town, especially their friend Margaret, made sure Daniel felt welcome. On Christmas Eve, everyone gathered at the church for a potluck supper. Daniel was shy at first, but soon he was running around with the other kids. Watching him, Luke wrapped his arm around Evelyn. "We did good," he whispered. On Christmas morning, they exchanged simple, thoughtful gifts. Daniel gave them each something he had made at school. For Luke, a small carved wooden horse, and for Evelyn, a bookmark with a pressed flower inside. "They are perfect," Evelyn said, pulling him into a hug that he returned without hesitation. "Thank you for wanting me," he mumbled into her shoulder. In January, the cold was bitter, but their hearts were warm. On a Wednesday afternoon, they all stood in the courthouse in Helena. The judge made it official. "Do you, Luke and Evelyn Mercer, swear to provide for Daniel Parker as his legal parents, and to love him as your own child?" "We do," they said together. "And do you, Daniel Parker, accept Luke and Evelyn Mercer as your legal parents?" "I do." Daniel's voice was strong. "Then I declare this adoption legal and binding. Congratulations, Daniel Mercer." On the ride home, Daniel Mercer sat between them, chattering away, happy and safe. That night, after Daniel was asleep, Luke pulled Evelyn out onto the porch. The stars were like diamonds scattered across a black velvet sky. "I have something to tell you," Evelyn said, her heart pounding. "I think now is the right time. I am listening. I am pregnant." About 3 months along, Luke's face was a picture of shock, then pure joy. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I am sure. I wanted to wait until the adoption was done so Daniel would feel secure. We are going to have a baby, Luke. Late this summer." He pulled her into a fierce hug. That is incredible." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes full of concern. "You remember your promise about priorities? You come first. Always. How are you feeling?" "Tired," she admitted, "but so very happy." Evelyn told Luke that old Margaret was already fussing over her about the baby like a mother hen. They decided to tell Daniel the news before he figured it out on his own. The next morning at breakfast, they braced themselves, but the boy just broke into a giant grin. "So I'm going to be a big brother," he said. "You are our son no matter what," Evelyn promised him. "I know," he said. "Can I help with all the baby stuff?" Luke just smiled. "Son, we are counting on it." Daniel took to the idea right away, helping Luke build the cradle and putting his 2 cents in on every detail. The pregnancy was tough on Evelyn, what with all the ranch work, but she had plenty of help. Luke made sure she rested, and Daniel became her little shadow, always there to fetch her water or lend a hand. He was mighty protective of her, which was a sweet sight to see. When the late August heat was hanging heavy and still in the air, Evelyn's time finally came. Luke sent Daniel to go get Margaret and the midwife, his own face a little pale but determined. "We will get through this together," he promised her, holding her hand tight. It was a long, hard labor that tested her to her very limits. Luke stayed right there the whole time, a steady rock for her to lean on when she felt like she could not go on. And then, as the sun was setting, their daughter arrived, tiny and perfect. The midwife laid the baby on Evelyn's chest, and a powerful feeling of love just washed over her. Daniel tiptoed into the room a little while later, his eyes as wide as saucers. "Is that my sister?" Evelyn let him see the baby's little face. "This is your sister." He held the tiny bundle so carefully. "She is so small," he breathed. "What are we going to name her?" Luke asked, looking right at his wife. Looking down at her daughter's face, Evelyn knew the name instantly. "Hope," she said, "for the little calf that made it through that awful storm, and for the future we are building." Luke smiled. "Hope Mercer. That is perfect." With their new little family all gathered around, Evelyn felt a sense of peace she had never known before. This life was nothing like the one she had planned back in Boston, but it was so much better. She came out west looking for a way to get by and instead found a true partnership that blossomed into love. She looked at Luke, a man who was always true to his word, and her heart filled with gratitude. She looked at Daniel and felt a swell of pride for the boy who taught them that broken things can be mended with care. And then she looked at little Hope, their whole future right there in her arms. "I love you," she told Luke, and the words felt as natural as breathing. "I love you too. All of you." Luke's arm wrapped around her shoulder. This family, built on honest ground and made stronger by hard times, was her everything. She had come out here looking for a way to survive, but what she got was a life worth living. She had wanted a safe place, but she found a real home worth fighting for. Life on the ranch would still be hard, there was no doubt about that. The winters would be tough and the work would be never-ending. But now they would face all of it together. Luke and Evelyn and Daniel and baby Hope, they were building something real, something that would last. And that was not just enough for her, it was everything. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.